counselor that was like, "Oh, you're good at math. Like maybe you want to be an engineer." And I was like, "That sounds kind of cool. I like taking things apart and stuff." And went to for engineering, and along the way, just like I think some of my favorite classes in my freshman engineering year were the CAD classes because I was hanging out with the guys from the computer graphics department, or as Josh said, it was the technical graphics department at the time. And I really dug that CAD stuff, and I'd done some drafting in high school too, and was really into it. And got to know the animation guys who were the TAs for those classes, and uh, yeah, it just ended up like I decided the engineering thing was a little too theoretical for me. It wasn't hands on enough. The fluid dynamics and everything was like just I didn't see where that was going to lead for me. It didn't really grasp me the way I thought it would. So I ended up switching over to CGT, and yeah, just took off with the animation stuff. We, as Josh knows, we took a lot of classes in like CAD stuff and technical drawing in like Macromedia Freehand at the time, which was like which pre Illustrator or at the same time as Illustrator, and yeah, it just took off for me from there, and I got into the animation. Um, Taught a class that I think Josh was one of the students in for one semester, and as uh, I guess along the way I took some. I think one of your questions on there was like, what other things did you do outside? And I really enjoyed taking an opportunity to do like figure drawing classes and stuff like that, music theory, and some other like things that didn't have anything directly to do with what I was doing. And I really recommend if you have the time to do it, to do those kind of things. Um, yeah, I think that pretty well covers the education side. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, cool. Like, so yeah, I did kind of the same thing. I took figure drawing and just, random. Like, I took a theme park kind of class that a grad student was running, and now like we have a themed entertainment concentration as well. So you never know when that stuff will pay off. And so,
totally.
like, you students have those like elective opportunities. Like, make good use of those with your kind of side interests and see how you can integrate them into other stuff. So, what was your favorite CGT class?
I think it was the animation and the lighting and rendering classes. I never dug like the editing as much as I did the or the painting as much as the animation. That just like that's what drew me in. The time, the rhythm of animation, I think was what I really got into. Um, the challenge of bringing some vision to life. I've never been a really artistic guy, like to come up with my own ideas, but when other people had ideas, then I would find a way to make those bring those to life, and that's what really got me. That's what really pulled me
So how do you feel about modeling at the time? Like, were you into
in.
that side of it, or just more that timing and the motion, the rhythm?
Yeah, yeah. Personally, it was more the motion and the rhythm and the timing. It's and the modeling was like I could model good enough. I never got into character stuff like at all. Even the animation side of character, I sort of went more towards the it didn't have a name at the time, motion design, but the 3D animation of like show opens and stuff like that. There was actually a guy. I remember they brought a guy in once that talked. He worked for a company that did a lot of the Super Bowl opens and stuff at that time, and that just like that path to me opened up, and I was like, oh, that's what I want to do, like that kind of like sports animation kind of stuff. I went a little more towards the news, which is a little less glamorous than the sports, but it's the same stuff, same tools, same challenges, same problems to solve, and that's really what kind of pulled me into it.
So at the time, that was kind of like a bit of a niche animation. I mean, there wasn't a ton of people doing that. I mean, you hear about like, Pixar coming out with Toy Story and stuff like that around that time, but this was kind of like tucked in the corner, maybe.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, there was. I mean, there was a couple of big companies that some of them are still around, like Blur was coming up around then. This company that the guy that came and talked and sort of pulled me into that side was a company called Resonate that was in I think that they were in LA, but they're not around anymore. They went away a long time ago. But that it was a very new thing to be doing the big animation at the time. Yeah.
So transition us then, like, so how did you get into your career? Because I know that like you started that kind of while you were still at Purdue. So tell us how you made that transition and kind of got your start over at I guess MSNBC at the time.
That's right. Yeah. So I actually there was a talk. Somebody, one of the professors at Purdue, had a connection with a publisher in Indianapolis that published a bunch of graphics books at the time, and I think it was New Writers Publishing. I don't know if they're even still around, um, but they brought an author in that wrote a book on media animation in 3ds Max, and so that was the tool we were using, and that was what I was really getting into, and it just happened to align with all the everything was aligning. And he came and he gave a talked about what he'd been doing at MSNBC for the last, at that point he'd been there like 4 years, and one of his notes was complaining that he could never get a good intern, and I was like literally the dork and that was like I could be a good intern. And I to add to that dorkiness, I think I brought my girlfriend with me. I was like, and then like, yeah, it was a lot. Uh, but I talked to him afterward. I kept nagging him, and finally, and that was probably somewhere in like the fall of 2000 or something, and so, or fall of '99 or something, and kept nagging him, and he was able to get me an internship in the summer of 2000. I moved out here for the summer and stayed in some college dorm, and impressed people enough, I guess, with my initiative. And I was looking for a senior project at the time, and one of the bosses was like, "Hey, I could like we could do some kind of work for your senior project. Like we could continue to work together after you go back to school and pay you." And I was like, "Yes, please." So I got on like the freelance wagon, and during my last semester in the leading up to graduating in December 2000, I was doing work on the side. They would send me designs. Somebody would paint up the designs, send them to me, and I would, mostly it was like at that point like animating titles, just animating big chrome and glassy text flying in. I would send them some little QuickTime files back. They would critique them, and then I would send the file back to the guy who gave me the job, render farm, and output them and send it off to somebody else to composite. It worked out really good. I didn't actually end up using it for my senior project, but I just did something else on the side. But it worked out really good. I just kept nagging him as my girlfriend was finishing up her degree in that spring of 2001. I helped teach that class. I teach a class in lighting and rendering, and then was able to turn it into turn the job into moving out here in that summer of 2001. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. I want to just kind of pick apart like a little thing you said there. You said about nagging him because that actually kind of remind right about the same time. I kind like, did they have an intern program at that point or
It was pretty informal, and they were a
okay?
little uncertain if they needed anybody messing around the office. But I think they had a hole in their schedule that they had. They really had only two 3D artists at the time, and one of them was part time, so they could use the help. And I was already uh, I guess I had sent him my reel, and it had shown him that there was some promise. To look back on that now, I don't even know if I still have a copy of it, but to look back on it now or think about what was in it, it was super short and kind of terrible. But he saw something in it, and like the timing was good or something like that, and so I just, yeah, it was, there was a lot about the nagging, like just keeping on him, saying, "Hey, you any new news? Are we going to be able to make this happen?" And
Yeah,
it worked out.
there's a certain way to like to be persistent without becoming annoying, you know? Like
Yep,
where you're they kind of remember you and know that you're there. Because I was gonna say
absolutely.
at the same time, it might have even have been to the at the SIGGRAPH we went to. I did a similar thing. I met a guy from Big Idea Productions. If I don't know if you remember, I worked over there, but
That
I
sounds
worked with
familiar. Yep.
the VeggieTales guys, and
Yeah, yeah.
it was the same kind of thing. I was like, I just bumped into the guy, and I was like, "Hey, do you guys have internships?" And he's like, "No, but we could make one." And this guy was completely unorganized. So the only reason I got it is because I called like three times a week and talked to his secretary. I'm like, hey, he said he could do an internship. How about it? And
Yeah.
it even got to the point when I got there, like they didn't even have the job. Like the HR didn't even know about it. He's like, oh, I guess we got to make this official somehow. So,
How are we going to
so
get you in
yeah,
the building?
yeah. So that, I mean, I just wanted you to, um, yeah, I think that's a good thing that you mentioned because, and for you students, you know, it's like, let people know about you, but you know, there is a point too. You can't call them every day, and you know,
Sure,
can't.
be persistent, but I think the idea of an internship is huge. Like, don't miss that opportunity to get real work experience during your school years and while you're not as dependent on the paycheck, right? Like, get and if this my internship was totally unpaid. I had to fork the money to rent the space in a college dorm out here while I was here, and they didn't help much with that. There was basically there's no money in it, but it was so worth it, and clearly it's paid off in a career. Uh, but it's I can't say enough about the internship experience and just getting real world experience outside your classwork.
Yeah, and I could tell you, I mean, Chris will too. It's like we're pretty flexible with our projects, especially like in your senior year. So like if you can get paid by somebody to do, you know, double duty and get paid for it and you're finish off your degree with something kind of like you were trying there, Jason.
Yep,
Definitely do that, you know, like get paid while doing your homework.
huge, huge.
Awesome. So tell us, maybe tell us like what your position is now and what that looks like, but then also maybe go back and tell us like how you got to that point.
Sure. Like now, I'm working sort of as a technical art director on working across our whole department to look for efficiencies and help refine workflows so that we can get stuff done easier. That's become really important in the last year when we're all not even in the same space. But like, what kind of tools can we put into the process that help automate repetitive tasks and get people more time to do their creative work instead of fumbling around hitting buttons too many times. I actually, when I started the internship, I was doing 3D animation in 3ds Max, and I started learning After Effects more after I got into the job than when I was in school, uh, and worked my way up animating for a bunch of years, and then um, one of the bosses kind of picked me up and was like, "Hey, like, I feel like maybe you could do a little more directing some other people." So I started dabbling in that, and then picked up the job of running our election coverage for from like 2010 to 2018, which is like our biggest project. They always call it the Super Bowl of news. It's like the biggest thing that happens really in news that we plan for. It's like a 6 to 9 month project getting ready in uh, coming up with all of the data displays that we're going to use. Uh, we have hundreds of different types of data displays, and we have to wrangle the data from all these different races and display headshots of the people and statistics about them and maps of the results and all that. So it's a big most of our stuff is reactive. We usually like reacting to whatever the breaking news is when a plane crashes or something like that, um, or train runs off the tracks, or some car chase, or uh, uh, whatever. Whatever. It's usually kind of reactive, but that project we know exactly what the due date's going to be, and we have to plan around this big night. So I ran that for a while, and after 8 years and a lot of stress, I was like, I feel like I've done my tour of duty. Maybe it's somebody else's turn, and have like sort of come out now defining this new role of working across the department. Like I said, we have about 100 people in the department. About 80 of them are artists, and the rest are like administrative or what we call coordinators, people that help push the stuff around. And uh, so I work closely with all the other art directors. There's art directors from the Today Show. There's some from the Nightly News, some from MSNBC, and we're now doing a lot of stuff for different digital platforms too. NBC News Now is like a channel that runs on the website, and the Peacock streaming service has news channels now that we're doing content for. I think a lot of people were sort of concerned that TV would go away when all these streaming platforms come out, but it really is more content. It's more places to put stuff. So we're actually getting more busy with all that stuff. And I think I've heard within the next few months, we're going to be producing more content for the streaming platforms than we are for the regular TV streams. So it's a pretty big shift, but it's not changing anybody's jobs. Like there's still just more of the same stuff. We need more animations for all that stuff. We need more design of looks for all that stuff. Our department covers everything that's not a person on the screen, basically. Like so, all the lower third graphics across the bottom and the graphics on the side and any big animations for show opens and all that. We do all that stuff.
That's great. So I know I've kind of noticed with the election coverage, is there a little bit of competition with the other networks, like to who can do the bigger and better data, showing the data? Or, I know CNN had the big screen that Wolf Blitzer standing in front of. Like, do you guys have meetings? And it's like, okay, how can we stand out against the other guys?
For sure, we definitely do. And usually we at NBC, for some reason, we have to be like, they just don't give us as much money as like CNN gets. So like getting that big giant wall, we finally got one now after like a bunch of years. But there's definitely a feeling of looking at everybody's last round and seeing how we can outdo it. Like I feel like the last one we did, I was really happy with our data graphics, but like ABC killed us on studio graphics because they had this amazing giant LED floor that they popped 3D graphics up out of. And we just didn't have the studio space for something that big. So we focused a little more on the data. I think we displayed it more clearly, but they got the whiz bang stuff that time. I'll concede.
Are you doing like real time, like like with the election, like there's stats coming in by the second? So is that stuff being, and with you on the technical side, I imagine, are you writing scripts that like kind of make a bar graph grow based on the numbers coming in and that kind of thing?
Yeah, we have people for all that. We've got there's a graphic system called the Viz, and Viz is like it's a real time. It's basically a game engine, but it's made to display TV graphics. It takes inputs from whatever databases we have to do, and there are people making the. I would handle leading the team doing the design side, and then we would hand that off to the guys to implement it in the Viz. And basically, they're scripting. There's like VB scripting and some C++ and stuff all in the back end to make all the math work out from the database and apply it to the graphics. And then we're working with the database teams to make sure that everything works to send to us. We have to sort of brute force have the team cut out all the headshots of all the candidates. Though this year there was like, we found AI tools that'll do all that. You don't have to cut out pictures of people anymore. And then we put all that stuff into the database and display it all. So there's a two-way graphic of two people and their percentages and the amount of votes they got and everything, and that's all just being fed automatically and played out live.
Yeah, that's really cool. And then on the breaking news, which everything's breaking news now, right? I mean,
it is. It's terrible. We talk about that all the time.
Is it kind of a wild timeline on things? Like, do you get called up at 3 a.m, like if a plane goes down or something like that? I mean, how does that side of it look?
Yeah. I think in my earlier days, that was more common that we would have to create an animation for that kind of stuff, and sometimes we didn't usually call people in at 3 o'clock in the morning, but luckily that's probably just because not as many airplanes are in the air at 3 o'clock in the morning. But when one would go down, yeah, it's like all of a sudden everybody's in a flurry. What kind of plane was it? What airline was it? And somebody has to immediately get on texturing it and finding out, like, was it the left engine or the right engine? Which one was on fire? And then the producer tells you, and then like half an hour later, after you've got the work started, they're like, no, it was the other one. And it's still due in 5 minutes. Like, we really would have to turn stuff around very quickly. Like, you see, I feel like when we look back on a lot of those animations, we look at it and we go, oh, they look terrible. But then you realize you had like an hour to do it, like start to finish. And like, you're like, oh, yeah, well, I mean, but at least we got it
Yeah.
out and it displays something. It's like it's conveying the story of what happened.
Is there like, do you have, what do you guys get for like when you need to research something, find out about a plane or whatever? Do you have certain resources or just all the news power of NBC or behind you, or where do you dig, or you just Google like everybody else?
It's a lot of Google, but we definitely like the producers are the resource to really do the journalistic research on the stuff, and we sometimes, depending, there might be a researcher, a person with the actual role of researcher involved, where we can ask them to do that stuff while we're actually animating. But sometimes it's just us trying to get there faster too. Like, which model of plane was it, and I mean, we're busy, obviously, looking up, trying to scrounge together texture maps for what an American Airlines plane looks like now, and making sure it's not based off of reference from some old version. Make sure it's current. That's plenty of work to do, but we're also doing some of that research ourselves too, just to try to get it right. And now we're trying to, in the like way back, we would just put it over a generic ground, but now we have tools available to put it over satellite imagery of the exact place where it was, which is kind of cool.
So what's your like favorite project or like a standout? I know you got some awards and things. Like what has been some of the highlights of your work there?
Sure. I think I would be most proud of the election work just because the size of it, um, and we did some really cool stuff. We solved a lot of really big challenges in making that stuff work. I worked with some really talented designers that had new ideas about how we could convey the information, and that stuff was always really fun to work it out. We got nominated for an Emmy one year on the election look, which was really exciting. Got to go to the Emmy ceremony, not the one you get to see on TV. The news and documentary Emmys are like a whole different whole different thing. But we ended up not winning because the news and documentary graphics are all together. So our data graphics were up against some dinosaur animation documentary for the Discovery Channel, and they totally won. So I don't feel too bad about losing it because we certainly weren't competing on that same space, but I think they should adjust the categories. Um, I haven't done a lot of animation in a while, but I did a show open for a MSNBC show called Countdown once. That was just like I handled that one pretty much myself. I mean, there was other people designing it, and I was implementing the whole thing from all the 3D animation and rendering everything out to compositing it all in After Effects. And that just like that's probably my favorite project I ever did. I'll have to look and see if I can find it.
Sure. So what's your kind of day to day? And I'm also kind of curious about, students are kind of thinking about, do I want to stay in Indiana? Do I want to go to the East Coast? Like, what's the New York vibe? I mean, I guess it's different now, obviously, but, what's the creative atmosphere there? What kind of opportunities out there? And do you recommend it? Does it kill you on the work life balance? Are you able to, you know, hang out with your family sometimes as well and that kind of thing? So,
Yeah, sure. So I think uh, like our in the culture in the building, it's a kind of a tight family. We got a pretty good sized department. People are working around different shifts and stuff, but the culture's really kind of family like, and everybody. I think we're missing that a little bit now. It's harder to keep going when everybody's at home and conferring like this, or just in calls, uh, or Microsoft Teams messaging all the time. But but I think we also have gained a lot in all of us get more time back that we're not commuting. Like, I'm, like I said, I'm living just outside New York, and a lot of people I work with live in New York. But we've all sort of gained back all that commute time now, and that's like time that I get to spend with the family instead of an hour each way commuting. But I think looking forward, there's a good chance it doesn't matter much, like where you live. I think we're looking at a good possibility that we'll be hiring people from wherever. It won't matter. You won't need to you won't need to move to New York to work for the New York office anymore.
Yeah, that's a really interesting trend, and I've been hearing some of that as well in podcasts and things that, I mean, and there's companies like Google and some of the huge ones that are like, we're online now, basically,
Yeah, yeah.
and for the, for the future, that we can think of. Let's see, what else do we have? Let's maybe move over. Let me know if you've got like a hard end time. This class
Nah,
goes
I'm
to
good.
two. You're good. Okay.
Yeah, I'm good.
2:45 is our absolute worst case, so we probably won't go that long. But let's maybe move on to advice for students. So, what do you recommend for students to just kind of get noticed or get their foot in the door? Or what needs to be in their reel or portfolio that will make them stand out against other folks?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think that the first thing is that reel is like the really, that's the important thing. Your resume, nobody's really looking at your resume as much as, sorry, Josh, if you were going to put resume development in one of the classes, it's not as important as a reel, right? Like when somebody looks at your reel, that's when they're going to see what you got. And keeping that thing, keeping that thing concise and getting your story told of what your strengths are is what's most important. I think if you're out there developing now and you're looking to get into motion graphics, just practice. Practice. There's so many tools right now and so many resources available. Just YouTube channels and online training in addition to your classes that there's no lack of places to learn from right now. It's amazing. Like if you're looking to get into some 3D stuff, like I think like around our office we're using 3ds Max and Maya for our hardcore 3D stuff, but we got people using Cinema, and I think Cinema is probably the best way to go right now. Like if you're looking to get into motion graphics stuff, if I was starting fresh, that'd be where I'd start for sure. It's a little more approachable. And it thinks a little bit more like After Effects does, so you're already a little bit in the door if you've got some of that experience. Um, and there's so many training opportunities available out there. Just I end up losing too much time watching videos on scripting in After Effects and new techniques and stuff all the time, and it's keeping up with the free plugins and tools that are available and the new tools, new plugins and stuff that are doing the cool techniques. There's people out there breaking down how stuff's done. Keeping up with what's happening in the scene with like sites like Motionographer. You guys are familiar with Motionographer? It's an amazing site that just pulls together some of the best work happening. The guy that started it, he actually used to be my boss, so I have a nice little affinity towards their stuff. But it's the editors pull together the best stuff, and it's worth keeping an eye on.
That's great. So students, think about questions you might have. We'll open up for a few questions at the end. I did see a couple from in here already. So Bailey was asking about Jay, sorry, was a good real time in your opinion. And I was kind of wondering too, it's like if you have a pile of reels, I don't know if you're directly involved in hiring at all, but like what jumps out? Is it the technical nature of the modeling, or is it the timing, or is it all of it, or is there any kind of things that you could say what to focus on that'll attract attention?
Sure. I think focus on. I haven't been too involved in hiring lately, and we haven't been hiring as many animators as we do like still artist designers lately. But not because we did, it's because we have animators that are doing it. We haven't had much rotation out of those people. But I think it's most important to focus on your strengths, or if you are sending something to somebody, like think of having a reel that focuses toward that thing you really want to do. If you have a bunch of material and it's more important you're looking at a motion graphics job, it might not be so important to highlight your modeling skills because that's not necessarily what they're looking for. So it might be worth tailoring your reel towards the position. It's a lot more work for sure, but it's got to pay off if it's speaking to the viewer. Yeah, I think focusing the main key would be focusing on what your strengths are and what your audience is looking for.
Would you rather see a short reel with like 3 really good things in it, or a longer reel with 10 mediocre things?
I mean, you could fluff it out with a couple of the mediocre things, but keeping it shorter and showing your best stuff is probably more important. Yeah.
And then somebody was asking too, like, what if you have still shots, or maybe like something you didn't animate, maybe a good model or something? Is there a good way to kind of integrate that into the reel, or should that maybe be on like a web page, or our students put a lot of stuff out on Behance and show their process on designing things and that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
So
I think that's more about marketing yourself in that package well, right? There's so many platforms that take the web design out of it that you don't have to do the web design so much anymore. So pick a good platform that'll let you, like Behance or any place else that'll make you make a gallery and make that whole presentation your reel. Like we'd rather see a well put together presentation that integrates the stills you want to see and the if it's the design you want to focus on in that piece, don't worry about putting it into the motion thing, but have it available on the site. That's how we receive most of our stuff now. Is more like, here's a website, and the website will have a reel on it or an example of a bunch of different animations. But it's less about like that. I mean, VHS tape from the old days or that CD. Yeah,
yeah, if you can find a VCR anymore. Sorry,
yeah.
Bailey, go ahead.
The question I would have is for
What's
the
a VCR?
Oh,
Go
I
ahead.
know what a VCR is. Thank you. I'm not that outdated. Anyway, I guess the question is, when you're doing an animation reel, do you want it to be framed like the way that what you're trying to show the visuals, or do you want, since it's 3D, to just show it in all angles? Because with film and TV and stuff, it's all controlled with the camera. You control what the person sees, but with 3D, it's all kinds of angles. And I guess when you're submitting that, what would you recommend going for?
Yeah, I think it depends on your audience and what you're wanting to show. Like if you're wanting to show off your modeling skills and that's the kind of job you're going for, then put it on a turntable and show it. If the point is to show how that integrates into a full animation and how you've composited and everything, then that's what's important. Yeah. So it doesn't matter what the backside of a model looks like if you don't see it in its context. So it depends on which job you're looking for. Does that make sense? Does that answer your question?
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
So I'm curious about, and we try to preach this in all our classes. It's usually our little soapbox speeches, but like what kind of soft skills stand out to you? Like, beyond just the reel, when you interview someone, what makes you hire one person versus another?
Sure. I think generally just communication skills, being able to talk easy to somebody, and that they're a good listener as well. Like it's the communication skills that allows us to share our ideas and get on the same page before we even start the animation process. If we don't all have the same, if we're not all working towards the same goal, then how are we gonna get to the place that everybody's expectations meet? So I think that the ability to clearly, concisely communicate with somebody and to listen well to what they're saying is like key for sure. I mean, especially when we're in our environment, we're moving really fast. Um, Being able to document that stuff and get your ideas across, not just in verbal communication, but writing communication and the processes of how you're going to do things. Being able to document that is really important. Um, yeah.
That's good. Jay was asking, do you think consistent posting on social media is something that stands out, or is that not as important?
I think it's tough because you have to have the right audience seeing it, right? But I think if you make that part of your package uh, of your marketing of yourself, then that's definitely a good important piece because somebody can veer off if you've highlighted it in the rest of your like front page of your site or your reel or whatever that you that you have this presence, then there's a good chance somebody's going to look at those things. But are they going to discover you by that? It's hard, right? You have to like really build up a lot of following to get people to notice you by that path.
I guess a follow up on Jay's is like for animations, what would you say are the good like sites and or good platforms to be able to show off your work? Because there's a couple for like 2D animations, some other animations, but like I don't actually know much 3D sites of where you can just go and show off that work and get critiques and find other people.
Yeah,
That's
that's
yeah,
a good
that's one
question.
thing Bailey's been asking me is just, I'm not as much into the 3D worlds though. Like, what forums are there? Like, if he wants a mentor, like, how could he find? Is it Twitch or is it, where is that kind of place?
That's a great question. I don't have an answer for. Like, I don't know what I can think of like places like Motionographer where people are curating lists, but I can't think of one where there's just like a put your stuff out there and be open for critique, not like a deviant art style space uh for animation. Like I can't really. That's a
Yeah,
good
because
one. That's a good one. That's somebody should make that.
like ArtStation is at least currently right now the thing of like 3D modeling and show off your professional illustrations for like work and things, but I don't really think there's much places for actual just show off your animation.
Yeah,
It's exclusively animation, at least.
I think you're right. It's lacking. I can't think of one. Let's start it.
I have web design skills, but I don't know that's going to be how.
Another question from the chat. So, if you go to somebody's site, like, what's the most important part? Like a killer landing page, or just kind of everything that's on the site? Is anything in particular?
I mean, I think yeah. I mean, unfortunately, like you start making judgments as soon as you arrive, right? So if somebody's got amazing work, I've already made some kind of call about how I feel about it just based off of how they started to present themselves with the landing page as I got there, and so unfortunately, it's a kind of a total package thing, and I think it goes a long way to think of it as a total package, like as there's some tie-in of your reel to your site and everything is cohesive. That shows a real attention to detail, and that tells me that they're thinking about holistically the whole package, be that themselves or my products or like what I need them to do too. That says a lot.
Jason,
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Chris.
no, I'm just curious. We've heard from some of our advisory board members that the way the interviews are being done has changed, right? So you have individuals who are going for an interview and then they're being given, time, basically they're timed on completion of like a specific task or so it's not just show up and have your reel speak for itself. So I don't know if you're involved with the hiring process at NBC, but I'm curious your take on that.
I've seen some work like that with our programmers in a different department from us, uh, where they do a lot of rounds before they hire a programmer for the websites and stuff, and they do that where they'll give them a challenge, a specific challenge. That's not something we do in the graphics department. We haven't really given people a trial thing to do in a long time. I think way back in early days we might have done that, but now it's more like we just get people's work, or we somebody says my friend's available, and sometimes they get the in first, or a couple of our creative directors have reached out to some schools to look for students where they had connections. Um, but yeah, we haven't really done that. We mostly just look at the reel, the site, whichever is more apt to the job we're looking for, and then talk to them and get that communication side down. Like, do they seem like somebody that we want to work with?
Do you have any like artists that you really like that are in this field that stand out, or you could even kind of pitch some of your, people that you work with that maybe you've got some work out there? Anybody that we should be following or looking at?
That's a tough one. I think, I just kind of consume that flow of like what's going on from, I'm gonna say motionographer again, but just kind of consume that flow and watch what houses are doing interesting stuff. There's so many now that are doing cool work, and there's so many places that have bloomed from just they started doing simple animation work and now they're doing crazy huge commercials and moving into doing movies like those like Blur always does great animation work, but there's a guy that lives down the street from me that works for the mill. They're always doing great stuff. They have a bunch of offices around the world. They've sort of moved from doing animation on to doing like full commercial production. I think like I have a bunch of like YouTube channels I keep up with about like doing cool stuff in After Effects. The Workbench is kind of cool. They started doing a bunch of stuff about. I think they've kind of stopped now. I checked it on the other day, and they seem to have stopped. But it was one of my favorites. NT. Let me pull something up here real quick. Like technique stuff. Look at like Grayscale Gorilla does amazing tutorials for cinema, and that stuff's awesome. I've been getting more into scripting stuff in After Effects to automate, and there's a good channel called NT Productions, and there's another one, Ukraine Media.
What's that one?
Ukraine Media, UKRAMEDIA.
Ukraine. Okay. You said Ukraine.
Like, it's. I think this guy's from the Ukraine.
Okay.
Yeah. But they're getting into like that's some of the ones I've been keeping up with for learning scripting stuff. Like I'm working on doing a lot of expressions in After Effects to make part of what I'm trying to do is make things more efficient. There's a lot of templates that we could automate instead of an artist having to sit and lay out text correctly or time an animation for a particular thing. If we can turn it into logic, what the artist would do and turn it into logic, then we can make an expression and handle all that in After Effects. And so we've been looking to do that. And that all just, some people would say it's going to put artists out of a job, but what we really do is we give them more time to focus on bespoke design instead of doing literally like monkey work. So they're doing a lot of like scripting stuff to make it easier.
So basically like just removing the repetitive nature of just like, okay, set this scene up, set the lighting, da.
Exactly.
And you don't actually get to do your talent.
Yeah, exactly. We're gonna, if you can turn the decisions into logic, and if it's not purely aesthetic thoughts, then why don't we have the machine do that instead, and then give people more time to do those creative things? There's already somebody has obviously already done the creative side of deciding what that thing should look like. Then if it's really the making of that thing over and over that we can automate then with different input.
So I only have another question or two. I was kind of wanted to flip one question on you and say, is there anything that comes to mind, like someone who you don't like to work with, or if you interview them, like what not to do? Like, does anything come to mind, like who's difficult to work with, or if somebody did this in an interview, it would be a definite no? Is there anything to maybe avoid, or something you see in a reel that you should never do, like lens flares or something like that?
We do like lens flares still. They're not out of style yet. It depends. But I think on the communication side, just like your attitude says a lot. Like when you come in there, a positive attitude will take you a long way, and a very negative attitude, which I'm a very I can be negative and cynical too much too, but like keeping that in check and knowing where you're being aware of your environment and how you can communicate is the key. Just like keeping that positive attitude in your presentation of yourself and what you can bring to the team. I think in as far as reels and stuff, I think it's pretty much anything goes as far as like content. It's your execution of that thing and how you've displayed your particular talents.
Awesome. So last question, do you have like a dream project that you want to do at NBC, or if you could work in somewhere in California and do something else, or like what sort of like your dream project?
I think that's tough because I feel like now where I'm at um, in my career now, I've moved a little bit away from the animation and a little more towards that process stuff, and that's not like sexy on the surface. Like it doesn't present itself to that dream project as well. I think in the animation days, it was the sports style graphics, these big giant shiny stuff. That's it, and I got to do a few of those. Um, and it was a lot of fun, like that working with the talented designers we had working on that stuff and feeding me good stuff to put motion to was where like I really dug the process, like bringing the life to that idea. And so I really enjoyed doing that, and as I've just evolved to more this side of the process and the workflows, um, then it's hard to dream about that side. It's like I what I enjoy about it is the problem solving nature of is we have these many tentacled problems and we need to organize them and figure out how to make everybody's piece of the puzzle work better. It's less about my particular work and more about making the team work better. So I guess the dream is a well-oiled machine.
Yeah, great. Yeah, and that problem solving too is like I've done a fair amount of programming, and like when you get that thing to work and that process works perfectly, there's
Yeah,
this dopamine hit of a sort that like definitely it's exciting. You have to do a little celebration dance or whatever.
absolutely, absolutely. When that thing works the way it's supposed to, and I feel the same way when I'm working on some of these templates, doing expressions like I'm doing JavaScript expressions in After Effects to pull stuff together, uh, and when it works, it's exciting. Like, yeah,
I did think of one more question. Like, just where do you see this field going? Is there some future thing that we should be looking into, or I mean, is augmented reality the new way we're going to watch news at some point? Like the Back to the Future, where Jaws is coming at you out of the building or something. What do you see on the forefront there?
yeah. I think we have been thinking about how we could use augmented reality for a while. Like, how can we actually roll out that usage to it so it is a real benefit to the viewer? And that's hard to see still. It looks cool. Like we make the augmented reality stuff of like on election night, we put graphics on the side of a building. We have big boom cameras with like a 20-foot boom on them, and we move them across Rockefeller Center in New York and put graphics on the side of the building. Uh, but we haven't been able to figure out how to bring that kind of experience in a valuable way to the viewer, to their personal space. And it's not that we haven't tried. We've had a couple of teams of people go through throwing ideas out there, and it just doesn't. It's novel and it's cool, but it like doesn't really pay off yet. So uh, we're trying to figure that out, but I don't think we've hit on it yet. I think the next thing for us that's really going to probably take off is when we get a little more into adding interactive elements into our news stories, where we tie together better our sort of linear stream of delivering the news to allowing the viewer to go off on their own side tangent within. We'd of course love for them to stay within the NBC News environment when they do that, but how do we add interactive content to the stream? And as we start to have these more streaming platforms I was talking about earlier, we totally have an opportunity to do that, where people are sitting on their phone or their iPad or their laptop or wherever they are, and be able to click a link on a story and dig further into that content themselves beyond what we're just presenting them in that linear format. I think that's where we're going to see things open up a little bit more, and our department is starting to look into how we tie better in with the what they call the digital department, which is silly because we all work in digital tools, but the digital department in our news division is the one that handles the website and some of those new streaming services and how that stuff gets to the viewer. So how do we augment the stream of regular television style viewing with the ability for the viewer to go deeper?
Yeah, that all that stuff's really cool. I know there's a lot of people trying things, and you see a news story that has some level of that out there where you can watch it. You're on a website and you watch a video clip of something, and then you can, kind of, there's usually some unique like a web environment that you're navigating
Yep.
through that nobody's ever seen before, like that kind of thing.
Yeah, our news division is trying some of that stuff, and they've had some really successful pieces. And the New York Times does some stuff that works out really well. There's a lot of people putting their toes in the water trying to figure it out, but nobody. It's not really like a quite a thing yet.
Yeah, I think the AR will definitely be there someday. There just isn't that platform or device yet because it's very novel, but
Yeah.
it's totally impractical. Like most of it, it's like you have to download a couple things to view it, right? So, and that's just not going to
Exactly
work for
Yeah,
people.
the barrier to entry for the viewer is
The
too
same
high.
thing as like
Yeah.
VR. The
Yeah.
same as VR. Like, it's currently novel and cool, but it takes so much. For VR, you gotta have a system for it. For AR, you gotta have space and plan
Yep.
stuff out. Then
Yeah.
there's the cost.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like, what do you want to see? Like, even thinking about people using their phones and AR kit on their iPhone or whatever, like, what does it really bring to a story to put it on their tabletop? Like, it doesn't add much. The value add is pretty thin. So finding like where it can really help is a challenge.
I didn't even think of like with our mobile and phone stuff of just like being able to click on the news and then open the article. With TV, you can't do that, but with interactive media, you can absolutely do that.
Yeah, we're looking at things like, I think it would probably show up first in elections, but we're working with some tools where you could have a video stream running on your phone, and maybe you're watching the video full screen, but then maybe you tilt your phone up and the video goes to the top, but then you see a list of the results below. So you can continue watching the coverage, but you can also start to dig into, I mean, when we're on the coverage, we're guiding you through the whole thing, right? Like we're telling you the part of the story that we think is the most important. But there's a lot of pieces, like you might want to know exactly what's going on in your Indiana race, and you have to wait for it to come around in the loop. But if you could turn your phone up and continue to watch that feed and then see a bunch of results below that are an interactive piece that you could delve into, or even like talk back to it gives a good avenue even for talking back to the TV side and engaging the audience and asking questions. We could get a lot of data of what people want to see and then start presenting more of like what they're interested in on the stream. But that's probably a direction we're going to hit pretty soon.
Great. Did you have any clips or anything you wanted to share? If not, that's fine. But I didn't know if you
I
had
don't
anything.
have any sitting around. If I was to show
Okay.
you an animation that I made, it would probably be like 12 years old. I'd still be proud of it, but it's still 12 years old.
They all want to see your college demo reel. That's what. Fire up the VCR.
Oh man, I have to dig that thing up. I don't know. Like I do have a VCR in the closet. I don't know if I have a tape around anymore that isn't dried up.
Right.
Yeah.
Any questions from anybody that's online? Any other things on you know about what you're doing, or what any advice you are seeking?
I guess the last thing is during an interview, is it good to have like a good technical knowledge of, I guess, terms, or is it just better to just be able to do the work? Because a lot of interviews that I've seen have just like asked technical questions and things, but they didn't really get much into like the actual abilities of the person, and I might be extremely poorly.
Yeah, I think something I did want to say, and this is a thought I had based off of one of Josh's pre-set of questions, was that for me, the is always more important for me that I understood the concepts than that I understood where the button was in any particular application. And I think that's something that I particularly got a good taste of from my Purdue CGT time, was that they were teaching me how to use 3ds Max, and they were teaching me how to use the Macromedia freehand, but it was more about the concepts behind that was what was most important. Because really, like, you should be able to switch from one software to another. You could be most comfortable in the one that you prefer, and you might have to adapt that to an employer that uses a different software. So it's more important, I think, to be fluent in the language of how you're working with your tool and how your tool thinks than that particular tool's usage. I think that's slightly adjacent to your question, but does that kind of cover it?
Yeah, I realize it's a little bit of a messy like question, because it's like it's hard to answer. I'm just like, do you really need to know the technical know-how of this thing, or should you just know the concepts, or should you just be able to show your work? And yeah,
I think it's that's probably different for every employer. Like what, like for us, it depends on if the employer wants to focus on plugging you into their system, or if they're more interested in and that you already have familiarity with their system, or if they're just going to let you do whatever you want, however you want to. And it depends on the person, right? Like if there's somebody that does amazing design and stuff, then you're less likely to ask them to switch to a different tool when they already know exactly how to do what they need to do. But if you're looking at somebody that you need to plug into a workflow, it all depends on the place. Like if somebody already is familiar with a particular tool, and they might not be as good a designer, but they fit into they can plug in better, then it's always, you're always looking for a different thing, right? There's always, employers are always looking for a different, it's a hard target to find, for sure.
Are your people on staff that are in 3D, do they have very narrow specializations? I mean, is there like a light person and a model person, an animation person, and is it broken up that, or do you have people that kind of do a bunch of different things?
No, ours are mostly generalists, really. Like, because we're in that reactionary kind of mode. Everybody can model, everybody can, but most of the time we have to go looking for a model from like Turbo Squid or something, because we can't spend the time modeling a lot of stuff. So usually we're looking to cut corners on that, and we spend the money to get a model for what we need as quick as possible and move on to the next step. But that said, all of our guys can model, and when given a little more time, they're not modeling specialists. They're more into the animation and setting up the lighting and the rendering quickly. Most of our team sort of works heavily in that get it done fast mode, and sometimes we have a hard time adapting when we have longer time to work on things, because we're used to like bang it out fast and get it out the door. And when you get a bigger project, you're like, what, I have all this time, what am I going to do? I already got it like 90% of the way there quick. How do I keep pushing it? So that's a challenge we often deal with. But I think you lost that thought. Sorry.
No worries.
I think generalist. I mean, it's really like we have to be able to. We might be able to put 2 people on a project at a time, but it might be a person doing the whole thing themselves, all the way through the compositing side too.
It's good to know. One question in the chat. I'm not the best at drawing. Would you say working on drawing is more important than working on animation? It's hard to have clean animation with bad lines.
I'm not a very good drawer either. I like I said before, I've never been much of an artist. I'm more about the bringing the life to the thing, and so I found my path along focusing on that section of the process. I think it depends on what you want to do. Like if you want to do something that might include drawing, then you should definitely do that. It's awesome. Like I said, I took like figure drawing classes, and I learned a lot from that. I learned a lot about technique, and I learned a lot about shading that is completely, and looking at light, how to look at light and stuff, and be critical of it and see where the light's coming from and how it creates shadows and everything. That it allowed me to focus on those things that I was then able to actually use in CG. But I think it depends on where you want your path to go. Like if you really want to focus on the animation, then get good at that, and take, like, you don't have to necessarily limit yourself on one aspect. Like if you're not good at drawing, don't use your drawings to make your animations from. Like maybe you want to pick up somebody else's work and bring it to life. You want to focus on what you want to do, I think, and what your strengths are.
I've seen plenty of bad drawings too that still actually communicated well. Like you don't necessarily have to have a work of art to draw a storyboard that tells somebody how something's going to move or how something's going to happen.
That's right. I mean, look at storyboards for movies, and some of them are amazing. Like look at the storyboards for Pixar. Come on, like those are a work of art themselves. But the storyboards, like normally what I see, it's just to convey, like, this shape starts over here and that shape ends up over there. Like it doesn't have to be a work of art itself to convey the message. It's that comes down to the communication skills, and being able to sketch that stuff out is a important skill, but not the quality of it, as long as it conveys the message.
Yeah, I've seen plenty of even professional work of just like the most basic stuff for all kinds of shows and movies and things, of just, it's stick drawings, but they said, here's the camera pan, here's this, here's this, here's this. They get across the idea.
It conveys the message. Yeah.
Any others out there before we wrap up? Josh or Cade, you guys got anything?
I had a quick workflow question.
Sure.
So generally when you're working with like a 3D project or something, how does it typically work when you have to deal with compositing and editing kind of at the same time? Do you kind of do both of those in After Effects at once? Or do you ever like composite in Nuke and then bring it into editing?
Yeah, so we do use Nuke a little bit on the side. Like we use it for a couple of like tracking and some stuff like that, but mostly we work in After Effects just because that's what we've got as part of our wider workflow. More people can then open up that project if they need to later. But usually, like on a breaking news situation where it's got to happen fast, we'll usually have one guy that's working on the 3D side and another guy working on beginning to put together the rough composite and taking in the rough quick renders to start laying out where we're going to label things and stuff like that. On the bigger show open kind of projects, we usually have people focusing on the compositing completely separate of the 3D guys, and it's more traditional post house kind of workflows, handing off the 3D to the compositing group. And then we're usually, if it's a multi-scene kind of thing, we're making everything a little long so that we can put it into a final edit. And that edit might happen in After Effects or it might happen in Premiere. Usually within our department, it would happen in Premiere, though our like the news editing all happens in an Avid. So when they're putting together a news story, we'll hand off a final animation to them and they'll put it into the piece with all the interviews and stuff. But when we're putting together something like a show open, that edit would happen kind of as a final step.
Okay, thanks. And then attached to that question, kind of, you were talking about sending it off to an editing department. So typically, do you try to send out like play blasts for editing so you don't have to render more frames than you have to, or how does that generally work?
Yeah, for sure. We're always in close contact with the producers on what their needs are going to be. Sometimes as producers just need to fill some time, and like they know exactly how much time they need to fill. Sometimes they come to us and they say, we need a 5-second animation that does 30 different things, and we're like, whoa, come on, like we need more time than that. Like we need to be able to convey the message, right? Like get across the whole part of the story. And so there's always a conversation back and forth, and we are definitely, as soon as we have something that's a rough version, we're sending it off to them, and the editor will be popping it into the piece to see how it fits, because they're usually giving us if it's an explainer kind of animation of what's happening, in some news story, then they'll give us a track of somebody speaking through it, a script, and that we can time our animation to that to follow along, and that'll go with as a placeholder with the placeholder animation into the piece. Then we're conferring back and forth and adjusting as needed.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Sure.
Anybody else? Maybe like a last question. Anybody got a good one? There was one in the chat about, I didn't know if I quite understood it, on tracing or rotoscoping for time saving. Maybe even if it's, I don't know what you meant about taking someone's work, Jay.
Oh, I would say, I mean, I think I saw something pop up. I'm not suggesting you take somebody's work, but being inspired by somebody's work or using somebody's work and attributing them is fair, especially when you're talking about marketing yourself. Like I couldn't do that on NBC. Like obviously we can't take somebody else's work and use it on air, but you, when you're marketing yourself, as long as you're attributing who you're getting this inspiration from, that's fair game.
All right. Well, I really, really appreciate your time and coming on with us. If you're back in Indiana anytime, I owe you a coffee or a beer or something. You'll be welcome at IUPUI if you want to stop by and check out what we got sometime, or
right on.
Just let me know if you're in town.
Fantastic. This has been fun, guys.
Yeah, and if you have any internships pop up, or shoot me an email or LinkedIn message, and I'll point you in the direction of some.
I'll give you some information, and I'll send Josh my email so you guys can hit me up if you need.
Awesome. So yeah, have a good rest of your day. I really appreciate it again, and thanks for coming on. We'll hopefully talk to you again sometime.
Sounds great. Thanks a lot, guys. Take it easy.
See ya.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And thank you, Josh, for posting the announcement, because I wouldn't have known about this because I'm
Oh yeah.
in the class.
Yeah, that was awesome. He's done some cool stuff, so it's nice to hear from him. And yeah, I'll share his email address. I don't think I have his email address. We've just been chatting on LinkedIn, so I'll let him know. You know, or he'll let me know if he's got something, and we'll get you connected if they got some internships or something. Anybody have any other questions or anything?
Nothing from me.
We all had a at least my class here. Hold on, let me stop my recording.